Welcome to the Framework Dowsing podcast with Chris Bacon and Jane Radford. Please visit the Framework Dowsing website for more information and resources. Welcome to Framework Dowsing podcast number 3. My name's Jane Radford, and as usual, I'd like to welcome Chris Bacon. Hi, Chris, are you there?
Yes, I'm still here, Jane. Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
nice to speak to you again.
Yes. Well, today we've pulled out of the ethers a bit this title, which is called The Different Levels of Dowsing. And yeah, it could be interpreted in a number of ways, but we're going to be covering things like preparing to dowse, using witnesses while we're dowsing, balancing the nervous system. We'll talk a bit about left and right hand side of the brain, conscious, subconscious, and possibly moving into sort of more ethereal areas towards the end. We'll see how things go and if we've got time. But yeah, so how I'd like to start, Chris, is by talking really about how I begin a dowsing process. And
yes,
I have got it's in diagrammatic form on the website, and sometimes I feel as though what I'm going to say is a bit boring or obvious or possibly doesn't need to be mentioned, but frequently I find myself having to recheck on the things that I do within my preparation to dowse. And I'm not talking about getting in tune with a certain guide or asking for support from some entities that are around me. I'm talking about really basic stuff, like making sure that I don't need to go to the toilet, making sure I've got water beside me to drink and that I'm not thirsty, making sure there's not too much noise or noises that distract me. I can actually dowse and work with quite a bit of noise going on in the background, but if it's out of the ordinary, if it's like a football commentary, I find it very difficult to dowse. So those are the sorts of things that I do when I'm preparing to dowse, so that I can see my work clearly, that I haven't got things in plastic wallets where the sunshine's reflecting back into my eyes. And basically in that process I'm trying to provide the least number of distractions for the nervous system. And I wondered if you had a similar sort of process or checklist that you go through.
Well, I don't think it's really so much a checklist, but yes, as you say, that it's important that you're not being distracted by anything. You want to not be sitting there worrying about what shopping you've got to do later on or anything like that. You really do need to sort of quieten your system down a bit and make sure there's nothing that's distracting you in the room. As Dr. Timothy Leary always used to say, about set and setting. So you've got to be in the right frame of mind yourself and be in the right environment to do this properly. And because you want to reduce the conscious activity from the left-hand side of your brain as much as possible, and to allow the information to flow across from the more subconscious side of your brain. So that's what I do. Yeah, but I don't really have a checklist as such, Jane.
Yeah, I don't think I'll have a checklist, but I must have, because I've created a diagram for it and I've banged it up there on the website to hopefully help folks who are starting off. Yes. But sometimes I'll be working and I'll realise that I'm sitting on the edge of the chair rather than sitting back into the chair and sort of using up sort of internal,
you can do that, can't you?
Internal sort of feedback or or internal poise and balance that doesn't need to be dragged into the equation.
Exactly, and or you can be sitting there, as often happens to me. You realise that you're really tense. For some reason, I think, well, why am I so tense? Or as you say, or why am I sitting on the edge of the chair doing this, or some other uncomfortable place? Why not just find somewhere much more comfortable? I think you have to. It's a bit like I always liken this to kind of settling yourself into a nice, comfortable chair, not physically, but within yourself. So that is important to go for.
Yeah, I mean, what I find interesting is as soon as I'm suspending the pendulum from my finger, is that the brain seems to clock into a different way of.
It does.
I'm finding it very, very difficult to put it into words, but there seems to be a perceivable change.
Yes.
Just in that motion,
but because obviously over the years you've trained yourself, probably not explicitly, but because you've done this so many times that you are just say, okay, I pick the pendulum up. That's a signal to my part of myself that operates with dowsing to clock in. So you've got it almost down to a natural process. But to somebody that's starting out, it's not quite so natural. And I think that's why beginners always have problems sort of getting the dowsing reaction, because they're trying too hard, where you just let the natural process take over for itself.
Right, yeah. Well, I suppose we've both been dowsing for quite a long time now.
Aeons, it seems. Too long.
Yeah, going back to you talking about quietening the left-hand side down. Yes, I see it as that I just want that left-hand side to be recording the results from the pendulum.
It's just the note taker, isn't it? It's temporarily the note taker. A good thing to do, really, and I still do this. It's not necessarily. It's a good thing to keep it. It's an overrated expression, but you could meditate for 10 minutes before you do anything important. I know that sounds a bit cliched these days, because people meditate at the drop of a hat, but it does, and has been scientifically proven to change the brain chemistry and get you into the correct state of mind before doing this. I mean, you don't have to go into it in a huge way, but just sitting there and just relaxing for a few moments. I mean, you don't have to do that every time, but sometimes if you're feeling a bit on the edge, it does help. And you can't see, you can slip into it easier other times, but sometimes if you think, well, I've had a terrible day today, and let's just sit here and meditate for 5 or 10 minutes and before we do the dowsing. But that's just one thing I do anyway.
Yes, I think I have done in the past. I mean, some days, and possibly we'll talk about this a bit later on, that it is very difficult to dowse, and it seems to be nothing to do with the fact that it seems nothing to do with what has happened earlier on, and
that's correct.
It seems nothing to do with the mental or the emotional aspect.
And I think, I think if I can come back to my mentor Tom Graves, that he always used to say in his books that if you don't feel something is right when you're dowsing, don't do it. Just don't struggle. If you don't feel, if you say, well, I can't really put my finger on why I can't do this. I know it sounds a bit lame, it sounds like an excuse, but this sort of activity, it needs to be done under the right conditions. You think, well, I just can't settle down to doing this analysis or dowse in this place today, and then there's something. It sounds a bit, again, cliched, something preventing you, or maybe you're just not in the right frame of mind that particular day to be doing that work. So I think one should listen to those sort of signals that are coming in from oneself.
Yeah, I find it quite frustrating at times, because I'll think, right, I've got this block of time in the morning, and I'll get on and do my analyses for today, and then, you know, I've got this rest of the day that I can do X, Y, and Z in. And for some reason, I can't. It's not that I pick up the pendulum, but it's as though I keep avoiding doing it, avoiding, and I can find myself at 10 o'clock at night thinking, all right, okay, I feel that we can get on and do that work now.
Yeah, well, that
and,
I tell you,
and Barbara said to me, well, you don't know, Jane, you know, perhaps 10 o'clock at night is better to be doing it then than at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I do agree with her, because
yes, I agree.
There would be some nights where could you say that the pendulum just has a sort of not a jolliness, but a brightness, and
yes.
and the information comes through so quickly and easily, and whereas other times it's sort of, right, I'll do this for 10 minutes, and I need to go outside, and then I need to and drink, and I need to come back and then do another 10 minutes. It's like really pushing to get information through on somebody who's really struggling and values some insight or support.
Yeah, and I think also that is a key factor, is that you shouldn't strain yourself with this, because you're not making things. It's not like doing physical work. You're doing something at a totally different level. You shouldn't push yourself too hard with it, because you're just putting strain on those other faculties within yourself. And the other thing about it is that if you keep it in too much of a, you say, well, if you're running a practice, you say, well, I've got to start work at 10 o'clock. It might not be the best time for dowsing, as you've just said. I mean, you might get more advantage by working in the late hours. In actual fact, something like that happened to me only, I think it was about 2 days ago.
Oh, right.
Without going into too much detail, I wanted to do some work on something, and I couldn't apply myself to doing it in the daytime. And I went to bed, and it was actually about 1:30 in the morning, and I got up and did what I needed to do, and it just flowed perfectly. So I think you've got to sort of listen to yourself a bit when it comes to doing this stuff. But there are external factors to consider, and I think sometimes if you work in the night, this is going to sound a bit strange, but everybody else's brains are asleep.
Yes.
I know that's going to sound very ethereal, but I think
most people's brains are asleep.
Most people's, yeah. And there is a certain silence at night, and well, for me at least, and I feel I can work better like that. But I can't prove the other people's brains are asleep thing, but I do wonder sometimes. But just as an aside, and bring a bit of science back into this, we spoke about this the other day. There has been some research done on ESP functioning and external events. There's a scientist in the States called James Spottiswoode that has done some research into free response ESP functioning and disturbances in the Earth's geomagnetic field, and also the time of day that these ESP experiments were performed, and it's highly correlated with local sidereal time, that apparently you're supposed to be more psychic, or your psychic faculties are supposed to be working much better during the period, I think it's 12:30 to 1:30 in your local sidereal time. Of course, that doesn't correlate to the clock time. You'd need to work it out from an ephemeris where the local sidereal time is. But it's a curious fact, so that there are these subtle external events that are affecting us on an ESP level. So maybe sometimes when you think, well, I just can't dowse today, I don't know why it is, it could be there's a geomagnetic storm in progress and you wouldn't know about it. It's not something you can sense normally, but just another factor to think about. But hopefully you've got some links in the notes afterwards about those two sort of areas, Jane.
Yeah, you kindly sent those to me, Chris. Thank you. Those I couldn't decipher some of it, but
No.
yeah, reading the sort of like the introductions and the conclusion parts, yeah, very, very interesting. So yeah, yes, those will be in the notes at the bottom, along with links
Yes.
to Timothy Leary and Tom Graves.
Yes.
And I'll put a couple into the Framework Dowsing website as well for folks who're starting off.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
So yeah,
That's
thank
good.
you. So sort of going back to basically, we've sort of talked about sort of balancing the nervous system, calming things down, and so that this dowsing information can come through more easily. I find using what I call the framework technique, or having a series of questions which end up being very simple questions or very repetitive questions because the information is contained within the frameworks.
Yes.
I find that also helps me to. I don't have to. I don't have to think.
No, well, I suppose you really,
Well,
yes,
what I
you don't want
mean
to be
is,
thinking.
what I mean is if I go out and try and do some archaeological dowsing, which isn't my strength whatsoever, but on the times when I have done, I've got to formulate the questions. I've got to think about what aspect I'm looking at archaeologically. I'm which era in history, or otherwise I'm going to get positive answers for most of the questions. But I'm having to create a framework as I'm dowsing. I'm having to create the question structures.
Yes.
And basically the question structures, because I don't know which way it's going to go, so having that structure of my main analysis sheets and from that being able to be taken off into a multitude of different directions, really helps me to calm down that sort of all those distractions. And also, I mean, this is a term that you've used, that not only am I lessening any emotional attachment, but I'm also getting more control of the ego and that, quote, lust for success that you've mentioned in the past to me, in that I'm focusing on the job in hand and not jumping to conclusions or thinking, oh well, perhaps it's the respiratory system, or I'm sure there's a few conditions in there. I'm just open to what's going to come up and which way I'm being taken.
Yes.
So in that way, that seems to help me to take my dowsing to another level. It helps me to, I feel, access information that I wouldn't have been able to access, say, 10 years ago, before I had another bit of the jigsaw that I'd put in, like another, at the moment, Barbara's doing a lot of work looking at the somatid cycle, and so that's expanded our understanding, or the way we slot the way I work into sort of scientific research and stuff like that.
Yeah. But you've got to have a base structure, and whether you're starting off or whether you're experienced as you are, you need some sort of structures to actually jump from. And it's you said about when you were doing archaeological dowsing that you were almost trying to make a framework of questions up on the spot, which isn't really the ideal sort of circumstance, really, because it's what when you're trying to operate with dowsing outside of a structure, and well, perhaps I should come at it from another point of view, that when I'll go back to Tom Graves again, because that's who I originally learnt from. That
same here.
Yes, he used to liken it to, if you were using physical samples, like if you've got he was looking for water, say, with angle rods, you'd probably have a sample in a little vial and hold it, or stick it in your top pocket. Or if you was looking for coins, you'd probably hold a coin or put them in your top pocket. And it's a kind of a physical well, you have a physical witness for what you're actually looking for. And by actually having the witness, by the procedure of saying, well, I've got a vial of water, I'm going to stick it in my hand, pick up my rods, and off I go, and I just follow where the rods are going to take me. Or if I'm using a pendulum over a map, say, you don't have to think about what you're looking for. So you're kind of keeping the process in a much lower physical manifestation, if you like, and the process operates automatically.
Right.
I hope that makes sense. And well, when I started dowsing, that's how I used to do my angle rod dowsing. I got very good results. Now the problems started as Tom Graves predicted, when I started to throw the witnesses, the samples away. I thought, well, I'm going to go and look for a such and such, or I'm going to dowse this map for something that's in my mind, because suddenly you've exchanged a physical sample for a very wishy-washy, intangible sample that's in your mind. And unless you can control what you're focusing on in your mind very well, you might start to get very erroneous results. And Graves used to call it psychological interference. I mean, it's like if you're dowsing for a remedy for a person, you think, well, I'm going to think of that person in my mind and dowse for the remedy. That might be fine if you can do that. But then if you happen to think of your cat, while you're doing it, it may skew the results somewhat. So people do have to be aware that can happen. So I suppose really it's why radionics practitioners use hair samples, because you've got the hair sample on the desk, or you've got your patient's case sheet, and it kind of like keeps the level of operation, to use Graves' terminology, to the lowest possible. It's keeping it in a quantifiable domain. Whereas if you say, well, I'm going to start dowsing for where there's life on a star map, then you suddenly moved into a very fuzzy area indeed. If you see what I'm saying. I hope that makes some kind of sense.
Well, yes. I always used to ask for a hair sample from a new patient, or their pet or cow, if it was a farmer or what have you. And I used to say, well, part of it, I'm asking for it for two reasons. One is that it's a link in with you or the client, and the other is that it's used on the radionic instrument plate when you put on treatment.
Yes.
And then starting to use multi-rate, where that became replaced with the identification number for that patient set of treatments. I didn't need the hair samples, and then I found that I wasn't using the hair samples at all. And I was thinking about this a couple of days ago, and I thought, yeah, but I've got the sort of record sheet there, and it's got a summary on the left hand side. It's got a summary of the a case history or the symptoms at that moment, and then I've got the right hand side, which is the record of the treatments that are coming up, and when to check them, and this, that, and the other. So I was thinking, I've really, that link has become their treatment sheet, whether there's anything written on it or not. It's got their name at the top, and and
Yes.
the later symptoms. So I thought,
It,
yes, I
it,
still have got a witness of a sort.
well, that's fine though, isn't it? Because again, you're anchoring your ship, aren't you? Somewhere, if you like, you've got an anchor object to work from. So it helps. You're keeping the level of operation to its lowest common denominator as much as possible, which is a useful thing to be able to do, really. So yes, that obviously works well.
Hmm. Well, it's interesting how I don't really analyse a process until I come to be talking about it.
Well, you
But
don't.
yeah. So it was,
It's like a lot of things, isn't it? If you teach a subject and suddenly the penny drops about something, you think, well, that was by actually talking about it to somebody else. The penny can sometimes drop about something very, very subtle. You think, well, I never really thought about it like that before. Almost like you really learned something yourself out of it, which is quite interesting. It occasionally happens to me. I wish it happened more, but it occasionally happens. I think how
you're winding me up then.
no. I think how could I have been so thick all these years about something? I thought that subtlety. Anyway, well, we digress, don't we?
I mean, I quite often think of the phrase, you know, non-judgment yet a quiet observer.
That's a good one, isn't it?
During the process of analysis, so that but as you say, some days are really so. Going back to talking about Tom Graves, you know, I've used a witness as a hair sample, a signature, a photograph sometimes, and now I tend not to have anything except for that treatment sheet.
Yes.
I remember in Tom Graves talking about using coloured discs, and I think that was to look for different sorts of metals or something like that. I can't quite remember it properly. Unfortunately, my copy got caught in a flood. We had where we were living, but
which is interesting that it was to do with dowsing, isn't it? But the mega discs were used originally for the dowser to dowse for certain types of quality of water.
Right. Okay.
If I remember this correctly, so I don't know how it works. I've never used one, but I think either if you was looking for drinkable water, you'd hold the disc in one of the segments, the coloured segments, and that would act as your witness.
That's right.
Linking.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had different colours sections to it.
That's it. Or if you was looking for black streams or water that was polluted, you'd hold the black sector. Or I expect you could use a pen. So if you were over a water line, then you could use a pen and say, well, what type of water is it on the mega? It's only another framework, isn't it? Another out in the field type of method that people use.
Yeah, and a few weeks ago, the Leicestershire and Rutland dowsers were at Abbey Park, and we were trying to track down, amongst other things, the remains of Cardinal Wolsey. And one of my friends there, Phil Hargreaves-Jones, he'd actually taken, a printout of Cardinal Wolsey. Which I didn't realise the sock manufacturers were named after.
No, I didn't realise that myself.
No,
That's
but it was
interesting.
socks. But Wolsey, it's knitwear and stuff like that, isn't it? So
I will never forget that now. That's made a connection.
Well, anyway, you can see the photo on the website, but
okay.
not on Framework Dowsing website, on the Leicestershire and Rutland Dowsers website.
Leicester side.
So. And I was going, oh yeah, what a good idea, bringing that along. Can I have one? Whereas other people didn't seem interested, so they'd probably got their own links in.
Yes.
Chris, we were talking, or we have talked a few times about moving out of using this framework for dowsing. and the fact that we both do this. We don't have a framework, and we I think having a framework is fantastic, and it is far, far less rigid than some people seem to think it is, in that I'm quite often given information via that framework, which isn't,
Yes.
which is supportive or gives me extra information, but that isn't for putting on treatment. That
Yes.
gives me more information about the patient, or a stage that person has got to, so that I actually had the homeopathic remedy salt coming up, and for one particular guy, and he so I was saying, all right, is this to be used on multi-treat, to be broadcast as a radionic treatment? No, it wasn't that. So was it to be given orally? No, it wasn't to be given orally. So I kept dotting about, and right, so I backtrack, because part of the things that I ask is that if I make a mistake, please can they let me know somehow? And
Yes.
really amusing, some of the ways that can happen, but that's a different story.
When you say they, you mean another part of yourself or something outside of yourself, don't you? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I do.
We use the word.
I always envisage it as being something outside of myself.
Yes,
because that's what works for me.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes.
So, in the end, on reading about sodium chloride homeopathically, they describe it as the pons asinorum, the bridge for asses, which, when somebody comes to an understanding that a homeopathic dilution of salt, which is what we all need as humans, can help them, or yes. They have an understanding. They then have an understanding of homeopathy as a whole, and can move forward. They've crossed this bridge, and basically what the information I was being given was that this person could now be treated effectively with the way that I was working, and
yes.
That meant a lot to me, that being given that information. And,
absolutely.
I mean, there's been other examples, but that is using a framework, but then also having to work outside of that framework.
Yeah.
Which is what both of us do consciously set out to do at times.
Yeah, well, obviously you've got that springboard to work from, but this is an important thing that I think anyone that's starting to dowse needs to be aware of, and I know this happens to you as well. But when you start to dowse, you're very slowly opening a doorway to another part of yourself, and I think this needs to be said. Really, you're getting the machinery of that part of your mind, and outside of it, the ESP faculty within yourself. You're starting to mobilise that. You're oiling the cogs by dowsing. Now, I mean, obviously you can stay a dowse. There's nothing wrong with that, but you are starting to activate parts of yourself that probably may have been dormant previously, and one starts to find that, as you just said, while you're dowsing, perhaps from a framework, that you start to get perceptions or pictures or images coming into your mind as well. And of course that's a beginning of, or the development of the beginning of clairvoyant activity. You're getting this extra information about somebody. And of course you should be taking note of that as well. That's valid information, as I know you do, but we're just saying to our listeners that folks need to be watching out for that. And it's quite again, it's something that if people are interested in this, you shouldn't try and do it. You should just, first of all, you should learn to dowse, and then as you become more experienced as dowser, these sort of perceptions will arise naturally. You won't have to do anything. You have to sit there trying to make it happen. But nonetheless, for me, I don't dowse as much as I used to, and I rely more on those perceptions within myself these days. So I kind of, I won't say move beyond dowsing. I just do things in a different way, if that makes sense. But there's nothing wrong with being a dowser, of course.
Yes.
I'm not saying that dowsing is a horrible low thing that you should do. That's rubbish. That's a very wrong thing to say.
I didn't.
It just depends on how you feel about these kind of things. But I suppose I've moved into a instrument-less form of dowsing in more recent years. But that's something that can happen. But if it does happen, then I guess one just lets it happen, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I find dowsing useful. I could never envisage myself as a hands-on healer or having direct contact with somebody, because I feel using the dowsing instrument creates a break somehow, a disentanglement, and really this is going back to something that I was trying to put into words before, and I'm probably going off at a tangent now, Chris.
No.
In that I was saying, as we try and develop either as spiritually or to be better human beings or more loving people, or however we try to improve, usually it means or entails looking at a situation that we come across from as many different viewpoints as we can,
Yes.
and time and energy is put into a problem that is before us. So we're not looking at a situation and thinking, "Oh yes, I'll just do that." If it means a lot to us, then we spend some time weighing up the pros and cons, both for ourselves and for everybody else that it affects.
Yes, yeah.
Or affects, is it? And so I was talking to you, and I was saying, in a way, dowsing goes, or what you were previously just talking about, is probably even more appropriate, in that if there's a situation or a problem, or we feel having some particular information would be useful, it's either using dowsing so that we get specific information that can be focused on the target or the client. And then there's this other aspect, this other ESP facility, whatever you'd like to call it, where you're summarising something, a problem, say that a difficult relationship or something, and you're asking for information to.
Well.
I'm getting possibly a bit lost now, but
no, not getting lost. I think the thing is, this whole thing is a huge juggling act for one. To be quite honest, that if you rely too much on a fixed structure, I suppose that applies to anything. If you have a too fixed structure within which you're working, then you will always be stuck in that structure. If you have a framework if we bring it back to dowsing, if you have a dowsing framework and you say, well, I've got 6 items on my framework, and everything has got to correspond to those 6 items, then you're missing out on a huge part of what's actually out there. I mean, certainly from the work you do with medical dowsing, it's vital that you have that structure, at least as a starting point, to perhaps gain other information.
And and to me, it's important I've got unidentified things.
Well, of course. Now, it's those unidentified that's interesting, where this the other part of us that has got information about things that are greater, or things that we don't know about. This is where the leaps are made, aren't they? Because you can get some intuitive insight into say, well, I've never thought about it like that, or you could interrogate something using your psychic abilities or whatever you want to call them, and come up with some piece of information. You think, well, where has that come from? And I would have never could have ever worked that out. And at the end of the day, it's proven to be a useful piece of information. Now, of course, at one end, if you're boxing yourself into a fixed structure, you're boxing yourself into a fixed structure. And if you go to the other extreme, you're getting lots of psychic information, and because you've bounced off into we'll call it a higher level. I don't mean that in an advanced or superior way. Well, let's just say we've changed the level to a higher level of complexity. The information that you're getting from that psychic spectrum could also contain a lot of rubbish as well, and does, much to my own dismay. But yes, but nevertheless, there are sources of information within that other level that can be very beneficial as well. So one has to be a bit careful when interrogating these streams. I think also that if you're a radionics practitioner or a medical dowse or any type of dowse, you want to be able to dip into that source of information that's beyond yourself, to be able to make those kind of breakthroughs like you just described with your patient earlier on. So we have to allow for that, don't we?
And I mean, it's lovely when it happens, and because sometimes I forget that facility or that ability is there, and when it does pop up again, I think, oh yes, there is. I'm very much aware that no matter how large your framework is, it's still a puzzle without any edges to it. And it's.
I suppose from a radionics perspective, I expect, it's this type of operation where you have somebody come along to you, they've got a problem, you do a dowsing analysis and you find out the treatments, you put them on treatment, and at the end of the day, hopefully that they get over the problem that they have and the problem's solved. So it's a kind of a fairly sort of cause-effect type of a basis. But with some cases, as you know, they've been to everybody. Nobody knows what's wrong with them. They don't know what's wrong with them. Their psychiatrist doesn't know what's wrong with them, or however you want to take it. And the intuitive, if they come along to somebody that can make that intuitive jump and say, well, hang on a second, I found out some information that nobody else knows anything about, and that information is relayed back to the patient in a certain way, however you want to express it, and it has a useful effect, then that's a pretty potent combination. Well, it is in my books anyway.
It's very, very rewarding.
It is. And I tell you
and you just don't stop learning.
No, and I tell you what, when it does happen, and I know you'll concur with me about this, you think, how on earth is all this happening?
Mm.
And it's almost nothing short of miraculous where this information is coming from and how it all joins itself together. So yes.
Yeah, and I mean, that is the question that I get asked the most when I'm doing a basic talk on dowsing is, well, where's the information coming from? And you know, perhaps that would be a subject for another podcast. Well, I'm certainly not going to start talking about it here. But
talk about for hours.
Yeah, I mean, we've said before, if anybody's got any you know, would like us to talk about anything in particular, or has got any questions that they'd like to submit, that would be great. Go to the website and stamp in on one of the forms that are on there.
That would be really interesting, wouldn't it? Because from all different perspectives and levels, it'd be interesting to hear from somebody about that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay, Chris. I feel as though there's some things that we haven't covered, but I can't think of them now. So hopefully, if we do remember them, we can include them, you know, in a podcast at a later date, or carry on with, you know, a bit of this at the beginning of the next one.
Yes, but before we sign off, it would be interesting if you could tell us a little bit more about framework dowsing courses that you have available, Jane, and where it all leads to.
Right. Well, I'm going to bear in mind that somebody might be listening to this further down the line. So rather than talking about things that are going on right at this moment, Chris, I'd say, you know, keep an eye on the courses page of Framework Dowsing. We do a number of different courses at different levels. So that's from beginners to folks who are at a bit of a loss as to how to create their own personal framework. So it's looking at what tools they've got in there that they're using at the moment. I'm putting that into an order where they can quickly get to focusing on the item that is required, through to people who are wanting to work with multi-treat 7, who are wanting to analyse and send treatments to clients and beyond.
Yes.
So in the future we'll be looking at courses that are to do with agriculture, courses that are to do with treating places and spaces.
I think that would actually the places and spaces and the agriculture would be quite interesting to, if I can make a request. It'd be nice to talk about some of that. I could probably share a few anecdotes, because the thing about it is that some people may be listening to this and think, well, it's all kind of psychological or do you know what I'm trying to say? It's all just about a person. But when you start to apply radionics to other areas, you can get some very, very startling results. You really can. And without going into the details, things that 25 years later I'm still scratching my head and think, well, what did this really happen? But it must have done, because there were witnesses and things like that. So it might be nice to talk about some of those type of things and bring it into a larger context. But I interrupted you there. Sorry.
No, that's fine. No, well, it's better to, otherwise it's gone, isn't it? Otherwise.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah. I mean, some of the courses that we do are you know, face to face, and they're usually only between 2 and 4 people. So they do, because they are very bespoke. Folks come and they want a specific stuff, so that and they're usually in Leicester. But other ones are going to be online, or they are online and downloadable so you've got your Skype support for questions and things that come up afterwards. But
Yes.
yeah, keep an eye on the courses page. That would be lovely if anybody's interested. Okay, Chris, I think that's it, and look forward to talking next time.
Certainly, yes. I hope we've covered a few interesting things and a few things about dowsing that we've not spoken about before anyway. So yes, looking forward to the next time then. Yeah. So I'll say goodbye to you for now then.
Goodbye. Thank you for listening. We have free information, including the multi-treat software, available on the website, frameworkdowsing.co.uk. Please visit for loads more information, including courses, tutorials and talks.